Welcome back to America's Commercial Real Estate Show. Thanks for being with us. I'm Michael Ball. This segment is brought to you by Plum Lending. Visit getyourplumloan.com. They do online commercial mortgages. Do check them out. Well, we have a great guest in Studio One today. We have Mike Lipsey, founder of the Lipsey Company. And Mike, we're talking about some tips for landlords for leasing office space today. So let's say that I want to choose a third-party provider to lease up my office space. What are some tips for choosing them?
You know, our practice is divided between training and consulting. And half the practice in consulting is helping teams win large listings, office, retail, industrial, investment, sales. And so they bring me in and they say, Mike, help us win this assignment. And let's say you've got 2 weeks to prepare for this major listing presentation. The first question you've got to ask the owner is, share with me the 3 most important objectives that you have as it relates to awarding me this assignment. And the client oftentimes is going to come back and say, we want to get to a certain level of occupancy. And you want to drill down and say, what level of occupancy by when? Oftentimes they'll say, we want to grow our revenue. And they'll say, which revenue? They'll say, our net operating income. And then they'll say, we want 5 to 7 year leases because we're refinancing in a year and we want to make sure we've got a lot of term left on the rent roll. The single biggest mistake made by landlord reps is making a listing presentation and they do not know what is the annualized NOI for 12/31. Mm-hmm. It's what the landlord wants. To me, it's the craziest thing, and I don't mean for years, I mean for decades. I tell the broker, so you're making a major listing presentation, there's 200,000 square feet. What is the forecast for NOI come the end of the year? Well, I don't know, I never asked the question. That's why they're hiring you. Right. But it's always unspoken. If you ask the landlord, they're going to tell you. So now I have the NOI target. It's 2.5 million. That's the NOI target for end of the year. Now you need to put together a measurable leasing plan that is the roadmap to that NOI, and it is quantitative. And you can do it by reverse engineering. You say, well, if I want 2.5 million, but I'm 1.8 million right now, that means I need to do so many leases. But to get to so many leases, I need to do some lease negotiations. And to get to lease negotiations, I got to generate proposals and I got to do tours. And you back into it. And the first test is it realistic for me to make that many calls, have that many tours, generate that many proposals? And it's not. Then in the listing presentation, you say, Michael, let me tell you what, we have looked at it hard. We're going to do a great job in each one of those benchmarks. You're not at 2.5 come to the end of the year. Even if we are exceeding the ratios in every category, you're not 2.5 until the second quarter of next year. You're still going to get hired because you're the first broker to come in there.
To be honest.
Well, and articulate.
Right.
I got to tell you a great story. Property managers spend months in putting together budgets. They go back and forth, right? So now the property manager's finishing up the budget, but now they got to call the leasing agent to see how much leasing they're going to do, right? Have you ever seen how that call goes? So I'm going to show y'all. Your group is going to see. Is this video or just audio? It's
video.
So they're going to see for the first time. So the call comes into the leasing agent, who's having Starbucks from the property managers who've been working 3 months on the budget. The call goes like this. Lipsey, how much leasing do you think you're going to do? It's the last thing they got to do for the budget. And the leasing agent does this. 50,000 square feet. Boom, baby. 30 seconds, they can tell you.
Out of there.
No math, it's like divine intervention, 50,000 square feet. Yeah. Well, now watch. Mm-hmm. It's the end of the year and you did 20,000 square feet. Mm-hmm. Well, the property manager gets in an argument every month, every time they submit the P&L because there's a variance. The leasing guy, she gets off the hook, he gets off the hook, they get lunch because they blame it on the market. Right. And so that is one of the most important questions you could ever ask me. We have been implementing performance leasing programs for over 30 years. And once an owner becomes, they get it, then they're going to manage their broker or their in-house leasing agent differently. Yeah. But they give too much latitude to the broker. And those brokers, and I train more brokers than anyone else each year. And I tell the brokers, you'll win more listings if you demonstrate a more disciplined approach. But you got to start off with the NOI that they want and determine, is it realistic? And if it's not, here's what you will have come the year. Now, for the first time, they can finally budget effectively. So it's about measurement. You asked me about selecting the team. You can't select a team that is not willing to commit to the measurement. And what's really kind of curious is the number of landlords that let the tail wag the dog. You know, they don't force this discipline on their broker. And there's really two winners. There's not a win-loser. The broker wins because they're now disciplined, doing more of what they should be doing. And the landlord certainly wins because now the NOI is more predictive. But you also get to the NOI faster. Here's the reason. There's business development and transaction management when you're leasing. And what tends to happen to most leasing agents is they do their business development, they find a prospect, they got a space plan, they got to get construction drawings, and that takes time. But while they're doing that transaction management, they're doing no business development. So they close a 10,000 square foot lease and they wake up and say, oh my goodness, you know, now I got to start doing some business development. So the leasing effort really is start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. You want to make sure that you hire a leasing agent that runs a constant parallel campaign, that the team is organized in such a way that someone is always doing business development while someone else on the team is doing transaction management.
Well, Mike, what do you say to the landlord or the broker who says, well, Mike, that makes a lot of sense, but based on the compensation of a half a month's rent and 2% or 2.5% of there's really not enough compensation for me to have the kind of staff to do that. Is the compensation model dated there? Is that why a lot of owners bring the marketing in-house so they can pay someone a salary to make calls all day and do some marketing to increase the number of tours?
In our performance leasing program, particularly if there's a lot of vacancy, we oftentimes suggest a three-part commission program. One a retainer, one a commission, one a bonus pool. Let's talk about the retainer. A retainer is, I'm going to take fewer listings and give your listing more time. And I am going to run a very disciplined approach. If you're pleased with what I did in the month, pay the retainer at the end of the month. If you feel like I did not provide you extraordinary service, you're not under any obligation to pay me the retainer, okay? The retainer tends to be some reasonable number that allows you to give up your other listings and give you more time. So now I come to your owner and I give you this extraordinary performance. I worked the tenant reps, I've made some outbound calls, I did a good job on the tours, I've got a lot of stuff in the pipeline. Now you, the owner, at your option, can pay me the retainer or not. But guess what happens? If you decide not to pay me the retainer, more than likely you're not going to get the next month like the past month, right?
Right.
But it's the owner's decision.
Right.
So now 9 times out of 10, if you really worked hard, you get the retainer. Yeah. Now you get whatever might be a traditional commission. Now let's talk about the bonus. You're an owner. If I get you to your NOI sooner than budgeted, will you pay me a bonus? If you ask that question 100 times of 100 landlords, and I've asked that question 1,000 times of 1,000 landlords, what do you think their answer is every time?
I think yes.
Heck yeah. Yes, it's hell yes. Because they all get it. If you get me to the NOI sooner, the building is now much more valuable than the small bonus that I'm going to pay you. The value that you've created is significant compared to the insignificant bonus that I'm going to pay you. So now that's what we see in today's modern teams. Large amount of vacancy, a retainer, then a commission, and then a bonus for getting to NOI sooner.
That makes a lot of sense, and it makes sense for everyone, you know, in the stack, the owner, the investors, everyone. So what about, Mike, if you own or you're a third-party provider, you're leasing office space, and you're trying to increase the number of tours. You're trying to increase the number of tenants that come to look at the building. What are some tips there?
Well, first let's talk about the tour for a second. The tour is the at-bat.
Yeah.
And for years we have had a wonderful training program called the Perfect Tour. And the perfect tour is, how do you set the scene? The reason you want refreshments is because you want to slow the tour down. You want to make sure that you can ask more questions and you can establish better rapport with the tenant rep broker. You want to make sure that there's air freshener in the space. You want to make sure that the building engineer is trained to hold the door open. You want to make sure there's reserved parking for the tenant rep. You want to make sure that you're using iPads when you're doing the tour, not old dated brochures with white tape all over it. So to me, the tour is the at-bat. And there is best practices just for that. The way that you increase the tour is you increase the denominators that get you to the tours. How do you get more prospects to your property website? How do you get more sign calls? It means you need to put more e-touches in the marketplace. It means you need to contact more tenant rep brokers. So Tours are a function of the denominator that came before. And all those denominators are e-touches, outbound calls, drop-in to see prospects, drop-ins to drop off small gifts to tenant rep brokers. It's running the right kind of advertising campaign. It's pushing people to the property website. So what is your strategy to get the tours is what is your strategy before the tour to get more prospects there. And that's got to be measured also. The market's going to give you so many tours. You know, it just will. So let's say the market's going to give you 4. But I always want to beat the market in every single category. I want 8 tours. But if I have better tours, statistically, if I have the best-in-class tour in the marketplace, I will then generate more proposals. So I'm going to double the amount of tours through my strategy, double the tours, but because my tour is off the chart, I know statistically will say that the tenant will say to the tenant rep broker, what a special building, and the hospitality was fantastic. Yeah, go ahead and get a proposal from them. That is the fastest place to accelerate your leasing, is put on a first-class tour, generating more proposals.
I love your training on the perfect tour, and if you haven't checked out Lipsey's training modules and their coaching, you check them out. It's incredible. Well, Mike, before you go, if you can give one more tip for office owners to increase NOI, increase leasing activity, what would it be?
Well, it's not just office. It's, you know, because we do office, retail, industrial. Mm-hmm. It's the first thing you have to do is put in a customer service program that you grow your tenant retention. You want to lease first to those who are already there.
Right.
And what many of my landlords do, they've got this huge line item for leasing and entertainment of tenant rep brokers, and they got no line item for tenant retention. They're not putting on any barbecues. They're not, you know, doing special things to show a lot of love to their tenants. So that's where good leasing starts, is keep who you have.
Yeah.
Because if I keep who I have, there's no vacancy. The void cost is tremendous because you got to pay brokers, and there's downtime and there's TI. So that's first. The second thing is, what is your measured accountability program that you've put in place that ties to the NOI? Here's what oftentimes happens. There's this detailed operating budget on the expense side, and there is no quantitative approach on the leasing side. And then make sure that you get a leasing team that's compensated properly, right? That's compensated properly, that agrees to adhering to reporting to you every Monday morning what they did, and at the end of the month, sharing with you what the variances might be, up or down. So that would be my suggestions to owners of all product types.
Great tips, and I love the taking care of your existing tenants because, like you said, the costs there if they leave are tremendous, and if you can keep them, boy, you're going to really add to your bottom line.
Well, if I may, and this is a book that we now give out because it's in digital form, called Tenants or Guests, and it's been a great seller for many, many years. And tenants or guests are, you had a decision as a landlord. Is that person in there paying you rent a tenant, and it's not ARE, it's OR. Are they a tenant, are they a guest? And if you think about that tenant as someone staying in your hotel who can check out the next night,
right,
then you'll give them the kind of service that they deserve, and then you'll see your tenant retention. And that's the first thing I look for when I end up on a building. What is your tenant retention? If they tell me it's 40 and 50%, they got a problem. You know, we like to see high 70s, low 80s. That's a good tenant retention number.
I like that. So that's a complimentary report?
Oh, it's a book that we wrote called Tenants or Guests, Brokers or Clients, Vendors or Partners.
Great.
And it's one we wrote years ago. You know, we've sold it over and over again, but now it's in digital form, and if they request it, we'll send it to them.
Great. Well, we'll put a link to Mike Lipsey's information. Do check it out. Mike, great information. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the radio stations, iTunes, YouTube, the show website. We love that you are with us, and we have a great show for you next week. Until then, be sure that you always lead, learn, and laugh, and join us for the Commercial Real Estate Show.